1500s, they stumbled across some peculiar ruts in the ground. These dugout lines extended for kilometers in seemingly random directions.
For over 1,000 years, strange shapes have stretched across the deserts of southern Peru. Known as the Nazca Lines, these giant geoglyphs can only be seen fully from above. Yet they were made long before flight existed. Were they signs to the gods, ancient calendars, or something far stranger? For decades, theories ranged from astronomy to alien involvement, but no one could prove the truth.
For over a century, archaeologists have marveled at Peru's ancient line drawings. Now, a breakthrough approach is rewriting what we thought we knew about these massive works of art. A team of scientists have used artificial intelligence.
Now, in 2024, artificial intelligence has revealed hidden details that experts missed for nearly a century. And what it uncovered has left archaeologists and the world in shock. The desert's secret canvas. Long before the modern world marveled at them, the Nazca Lines were born in one of the most extreme environments on Earth. The Nazca people lived in southern Peru between 100 BCE and 800 CE, in a region so dry that parts of it receive almost no rainfall throughout the year. The desert sun burned mercilessly, the winds rarely shifted, and the soil seemed inhospitable. Yet against these odds, the Nazca built a thriving society that lasted for centuries. Their survival depended on ingenuity, and nowhere was this clearer than in how they mastered water. Because rainfall was so rare, they engineered a network of underground aqueducts known as puquios. These spiraling shafts and tunnels tapped into groundwater and carried it to the surface for irrigation. Some of these systems still function today, proving just how advanced their engineering truly was. With this lifeline, the Nazca were able to cultivate maize, beans, peanuts, squash, and cotton. They also raised animals like llamas and guinea pigs, weaving the fabric of a stable and self-sufficient society in one of the harshest climates imaginable. But the Nazca were not only practical engineers, they were cultural visionaries. Their pottery and textiles reveal vivid images of animals, plants, and supernatural beings, painted in bright colors that express their worldview. These designs suggest a belief system centered on fertility, nature, and the cycles of life. Rituals likely played a central role, particularly those connected to rain and agriculture. For a people so dependent on water, the balance between the natural and spiritual worlds was critical. Accessible within all its features, one of the major ceremonial life places was Cahuachi, the great ceremonial center lying next to the Nazca River. Cahuachi was never meant to be a city with permanent residents. It was rather a sacred gathering across pyramids, temples, and open plazas. It has unearthed musical instruments and ceremonial masks, as well as offerings, revealing the festivals and rituals wherein communities became bonded. Here, there was a nexus of spirits where humans would gather for worshiping gods, fertility, and prayers for survival. In the desert, something came to life near Cahuachi, like the way something would start to create very large forms, carefully scratched into the surface of the ground, sprawled across miles and miles of the plains. He was deliberate and intentional, astonishingly precise, and did not dabble randomly here or there. They were something like huge shapes. At this point, there is disagreement among the scholars on their exact meanings, but surely their proximity to such a major ceremonial center indicates that they were not just empty spacing in the landscape, but rather bore cultural or religious importance. Some scholars believe that these were places used during processions or offerings to deities, while others believe these were symbolic indicators of water or fertility. To the Nazca, it wasn't an empty desert. It had a life, a sacred stage on which one could inscribe all their beliefs, fears, and hopes at such a gigantic scale that no one on the ground could take in the entire composition. Only the heavens above would see their work in full from the sky after it was completed. All these lines were understood for centuries, since they were left untouched because of the dry and silent desert. Invisible to the world, they languished under the burning gaze of the sun. Yet even as we begin to understand their origin, one question remains. How could such people without modern tools or flight draw such precision figures hundreds of meters across the Earth? The answer lies not in myth or mystery, but in the clever methods of desert engineers who turned the barren Earth into their ruler and compass. Engineering giants without flight. Standing on the desert floor, the Nazca lines barely reveal themselves. They look like shallow trenches, simple paths cleared of dark stones. But step back, far back, and those shallow lines become giant hummingbirds, monkeys, and trapezoids stretching across miles. The puzzle has always been the same. How did a people without airplanes, satellites, or even tall towers create works so massive that their full beauty can only be seen from the sky? The answer lies in simple but ingenious methods. The Nazca desert floor is covered in a layer of reddish-brown pebbles rich in iron oxide. Beneath this dark crust lies a pale, yellowish soil. By scraping away the surface stones, the Nazca exposed the lighter earth underneath. The contrast made the design stand out like chalk on a blackboard. And because the desert is one of the driest and most windless regions on the planet, the lines remained preserved for centuries, untouched by erosion or rainfall. But preservation is one thing. Creation is another. The sheer size of the figures suggests meticulous planning. Some shapes span hundreds of meters. Straight lines extend for several kilometers without wavering. The symmetry of animals like the spider or the hummingbird is so precise that archaeologists once wondered if advanced tools were involved. Yet evidence points to something far more accessible: wooden stakes, ropes, and geometry. Archaeological excavations have uncovered stakes still planted in the desert soil. These served as reference points, anchors for ropes that could be stretched taut to create straight lines, or swung in arcs to trace curves. Using grids or radial projection, the Nazca likely sketched smaller versions of their designs on pottery or in sand, then scaled them up onto the desert floor. This technique mirrors the same principles artists use today to enlarge drawings with grids, except their canvas was the size of valleys. Modern archaeologists have confirmed that these methods can indeed be performed. Under a few people with some wooden stakes and cords, researchers could replicate full-scale geoglyphs in a matter of days. No advanced technologies are required, just proper planning, cooperation, and patience. As exciting as the diversity in shapes is, it leaves one stunned. Some are as simple as straight pathways, while others are trapezoids, spirals, or even highly complex animal and human figures. The coiled-tailed monkey stretches almost to 300 feet, while the hummingbird has an equally impressive span of over 300 feet, perfectly aligned wings at that. All designs are based not on improvisation, but rather on a clear understanding of mathematics. But even the Nazca themselves could not see the completed images as they were above them. There was nothing found to indicate that they built viewing platforms or towers tall enough for the figures to gather as one would from above. This led some scholars to suggest that they were actually made not for the eyes of men, but were, again, symbolic offerings to the gods. Designs made so immense that only the gods or spirits or heavenly beings from high above would appreciate them. It remained, however, hidden from humankind for centuries. On the ground, the designs blended into the desert. To travelers and locals alike, they appeared as simple pathways. It was only after the 20th century, when planes whizzed over southern Peru, that the world learned what these deserts had been hiding all along. A very large gallery of giant earthworks, invisible wings. And once the outside world discovered them, theories exploded, from calendars to ritual walkways to even alien landing strips. But no explanation could fully solve the mystery. theories that shaped the mystery. When the first pilots flew over southern Peru in the early 20th century, they could hardly believe their eyes. Beneath them stretched enormous shapes, straight lines running for miles, trapezoids cutting across valleys, and massive figures of animals etched into the desert. From the ground, they had looked like simple trails. From the air, they were something else entirely. The discovery stunned the modern world and sparked a debate that has lasted for nearly a century. The first detailed study came in 1927, when Peruvian archaeologist Toribio Mejia Chespe noticed unusual markings while surveying the desert. But it wasn't until 1939 that American researcher Paul Kosok made the breakthrough observation from the air. These weren't random paths, but intentional designs. Kosok called the Nazca Desert the world's largest astronomy book, believing the lines aligned with celestial bodies. To him, they were a massive calendar, tracking solstices, equinoxes, and other astronomical events critical for agriculture. His theory gained traction because some lines did seem to point toward the horizon where the sun rose or set during seasonal changes. Kosok's work inspired German mathematician Maria Reiche, who dedicated her life to studying the lines. For decades, she measured, mapped, and documented them under the blistering desert sun. Reiche believed the figures were part of a vast astronomical observatory. With a simple compass and tape measure, she traced alignments between geoglyphs and the positions of stars. To her, the hummingbird, monkey, and other animals were symbolic constellations, and the lines were a tool for predicting seasonal cycles. Her tireless advocacy brought international attention to the Nazca Lines and helped secure them as a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1994. But not all scholars agreed with the giant calendar theory. Some pointed out that while certain alignments seemed convincing, many others did not match astronomical events at all. As more lines were mapped, the picture grew too complex to explain solely with the stars. Alternative theories began to emerge. One of the changes was the most urgent, in shifting the focus from the celestial to the terrestrial. For living in one of the most arid places in the world, the water systems underground were the only basis on which the Nazca depended for survival. Archaeologists have seen several lines that seem to lead toward sources of water or follow paths of ancient aqueducts. Spirals and zigzagging shaped lines might represent a stream of water, while animal shapes like birds and monkeys, creatures associated with fertility and rain in Andean culture, may have been incorporated into the works as prayers for abundance. Moreover, such geoglyphs are not calendars. They were part of rituals performed to honor water and assure existence. Other experts proposed the idea that the lines functioned as ceremonial pathways. Evidence suggests that some of the long, straight paths were repeatedly walked on, suggesting that groups of people later used them as processions or rituals. Viewed this way, the geoglyphs were not meant to be seen from above at all, but rather experienced walking along them, a sacred journey across the desert. Not all the theories, of course, could be traced to archaeology. Especially in the popular imagination, theories could leap into the fantastic. Books and documentaries alleging that the Nazca Lines were signals for extraterrestrial beings, landing strips for alien spacecraft, or messages to those in the sky. While these were easy labels for archaeologists to dismiss, they captured the public's imagination and firmly placed the Nazca Lines among the world's greater mysteries, beyond human grasp. For decades, arguments circulated over whether the lines were calendar events, prayers, pathways, or messages from the cosmos. None fitted all. The looming enigma deepened until technology opened up another way of seeing what was lost on human vision. That breakthrough came not from another archaeologist with a compass, but from artificial intelligence scanning the desert in ways no human ever could. AI exposes the hidden figures. For nearly a century, researchers studied the Nazca Lines using aerial surveys, maps, and even satellites. Hundreds of geoglyphs had been catalogued, but archaeologists knew there had to be more. The Nazca Desert stretches for miles, and many figures had faded with time, erosion, and human activity. Traditional methods simply couldn't keep up with the vast scale. What was needed wasn't just sharper eyes, it was a new way of seeing. That turning point came in 2022, when a team from Yamagata University in Japan partnered with IBM researchers. Their approach combined high-resolution drone photography with artificial intelligence trained to recognize patterns invisible to humans. Thousands of overlapping images were captured from the desert, creating a digital map far more detailed than any before. The data was then fed into a machine learning model designed to spot geometric outlines, irregularities in soil color, and shapes consistent with known geoglyphs.
Peru's famous Nazca lines are gigantic prehistoric images etched onto the ground that were created some 2,000 years ago.
Unlike a human researcher who might study a few hundred photographs over months, the AI could analyze tens of thousands in days. It scanned for subtle contrasts, traced partial curves, and connected fragmented lines. Where a person might dismiss a faint outline as erosion, the algorithm could recognize it as part of a larger design. In effect, the AI became a filter, highlighting promising areas for archaeologists to investigate on the ground. Between late 2022 and early 2023, the team verified the results through fieldwork. Walking the desert for over 1,200 hours, they inspected each flagged site. What they uncovered stunned even the most seasoned experts: 303 previously unknown geoglyphs. These new figures bore little resemblance to the famous hummingbirds or monkeys known around the globe. Most were smaller, some only measuring between 5 and 20 meters across, and crudely designed. They include human-like figures with arms akimbo, semi-crouching poses, and large-headed depictions. Others were in the form of abstract designs, feet, and incomplete outlines, as if their creation were halted for reasons unknown. Some were barely noticeable to the naked eye, existing thanks to the lifelessness of the desert. What was most shocking about such discoveries was their breach of the already existent protocol. Namely, for decades, the interpretations of the Nazca lines had revolved around large, symmetrical, well-thought-out shapes, mainly associated with ritualistic or astronomical phenomena. But these new geoforms told a divergent tale, one that lacked similarities to cosmic calendars, but more to captures of life in practice for some communities, expressions of those communities, or symbols of their identity. Some were even playful, endowed with exaggerated proportions and figurative licenses. Not only did it increase the number of geoglyphs, but it also altered the terminology under discussion regarding their purpose. If the Nazca carved both massive ritual figures and smaller irregular ones, then the lines cannot have been the result of a single aesthetic hand. They formed part of a layered cultural landscape in which different groups, at different times, have etched their meanings into the desert floor. Their implication is more than just an academic debate. It highlights that for decades, human interpretation has been influenced to see only the grand and the symmetric, while the crude and the commonplace were overlooked. Those 303 hidden figures could have remained undiscovered forever, if not for the AI. And with that, a bigger truth began to emerge. One that forced scholars to question everything they thought they knew about the Nazca lines, and why the world is now in shock. The revelation that shook the world. For decades, the Nazca lines were framed as a single, unified mystery. They were believed to be sacred calendars, ritual pathways, or cosmic messages to the gods. Museums, textbooks, and documentaries repeated these explanations until they felt certain. But the discoveries made with artificial intelligence shattered that certainty. The truth was more complicated and more unsettling. The 303 newly identified geoglyphs did not fit neatly into the old categories. Many were small, asymmetrical, and seemingly casual. Nothing like the elegant hummingbird or perfectly coiled monkey that had become symbols of the Nazca Desert. Some figures looked unfinished. Others were abstract. Still others resembled human forms in ordinary poses, not divine creatures or celestial guides. These weren't the polished icons of ritual worship. They were raw, diverse, and very human. This was the shock. The Nazca Lines were not one grand project with a single sacred purpose. Instead, they reflected a range of functions created by different communities at different times, for reasons that varied from ceremonial to personal. The desert was not simply a holy stage for priests. It was a living canvas used by generations of people to inscribe identity, culture, and survival. For archaeologists, this realization was both exciting and humbling. It meant that earlier theories, while valuable, had been too narrow. By focusing only on the largest and most impressive figures, researchers had missed an entire layer of meaning. AI didn't just reveal new lines, it revealed the limitations of human interpretation. So did that shake the world. If experts could misread and misunderstand the Nazca Lines for almost a century, then what else might be misread in archaeology? How many other ancient sites, processed through modernized expectations, hide historical truths that we have brushed aside because we assumed too much? The very shocking revelations that came forth from the Nazca Desert became more than just a regional finding. They became a warning about how history is being studied and how fragile our assumptions can be. A global response, from awe to discomfort, came forth. The headlines that proclaimed that AI had decoded the truth behind the Nazca Lines triggered a reassessment by museums and educators of narratives that they had held dear. Academics would suggest that new evidence did not merely deepen the mystery, it upheaved it. To a public long fascinated by tales of aliens and star maps, the big surprise was that the truth was far wilder. The Nazca Lines were bizarre, yet mundane, both ritual and routine, and both sacred and human. It does not diminish the amazement that geoglyphs inspire in any way. To the contrary, it ends up enhancing it. Instead of purely rigid astronomical equipment or enigmatic communications from gods, they are considered something much more dynamic, an expression of a society assimilating, learning, and leaving behind more of its humanity than we ever knew it ever had. The Nazca Lines have inspired awe and mystery for centuries, but with artificial intelligence revealing hundreds of hidden figures, we now know the truth is more complex than we ever imagined. Do you think AI will continue to rewrite history? Let us know your thoughts below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and watch our next video, where